As JC mentioned, about 5 years ago, I wrote a book called Power Rivals. And the subtitle was America and China's Superpower Struggle. And the basic theme of the book is that America was struggling to stay a superpower and China was struggling to become one. So it's a good time, 5 years on, to assess where we are. So I came back from Colorado back to Washington because of the U.S.-China rivalry. I was very concerned what was going on. And so I wrote the book. I started a think tank called the Economic Security Council, economicsecuritycouncil.org. And it's focused on U.S.-China rivalry, in particular in maritime security, shipping, ship repair, and critical minerals. And of course, last week we had the National Security Strategy release, so it's a good time on this panel with my colleagues to talk about where we sit. I want to start with just one interesting way to look at China, because you can look at China in many ways. And it took me a long time to come to this conclusion, but the best way to look at it at China is it's not one country. It's really two countries. It's one country of about 500 million people, which is extremely well developed, very sophisticated, middle-income country. And then it's another country of, say, 900 million, which is an emerging market country, a developing country with relatively low wages, low education levels. And I think it's good to think about China this way, because that way you don't underestimate it or overestimate it. So think about that. So we're a country, very sophisticated country of 330. They're a country of roughly 500 million. Okay, so I'm coming out in January. Our Economic Security Council is coming out with January with a state of the U.S.-China rivalry report. So let me just give you some bullets from this report, which will be out in January. My two broad takeaways is that basically China is expanding and doubling down on three things. Number one, a mercantilist economic policy. No change there. You probably saw yesterday, Wall Street Journal, China has already recorded a $1 trillion trade surplus for this year, first time. That's despite what, 47% tariff on Chinese imports. China exports to the United States are down, but they're up almost everywhere else. Southeast Asia, Europe, Latin America, no change there. Military and cyber capabilities continue to expand and strengthen. Nuclear capabilities have the number of nuclear warheads has doubled since 2018. And in terms of its repressive government, no change there. And I think Senator Brownback was very effective in giving his pitch about freedom of religion regarding China. So my second takeaway in terms of economics, politics, defense, and psychology, the U.S. is losing ground in the U.S.-China rivalry and risks, or is at risk, of losing all the benefits that go with being a superpower, a trusted and reliable superpower. Our problem, the United States challenge or problem, is not primarily economic, it's political. China quietly executes 5-year plans while the United States closes its government every 5 years. China, in a determined and disciplined manner, has built and is building a global platform to leapfrog America in key sectors. And key sectors and key geographies. I mean, it's from the seabed in terms of getting fiber optic, protecting or injuring fiber optic cables, to getting nodules off the seabed, to process rare earths from the space, cyber, the Arctic. I don't know if you saw, but yesterday there was an article about China had the first cargo container ship that went from China to the UK through the Arctic route, saving about 20 days and a lot of money. So this is a global challenge. Now, we have two very different systems, economic systems and political systems. And as I mentioned when we had the talk on manufacturing, you know, we're America and Congress and our financial markets are very short-term oriented. So we focus on short-term political and financial gains over finding common ground to achieve, you know, strategic objectives. China's advantage is that they can move with speed and scale. But China has significant vulnerabilities, which we need to exploit. But I have to say, China plays a weak hand pretty well. From China's perspective, Beijing's perspective, when the leadership looks at America, they see a country that they believe is divided, distracted, and in relative decline. And our goal here, in other words, America and its partners and allies, we have to work together to prove them wrong on all three counts and renew what I think is the American brand, the winning American brand. It's dynamic stability. We're dynamic politically and economically, but we're also stable politically and economically. And that's what China's trying to injure, that perception. A couple things that normally don't come into a U.S.-China debate is our debt and our fiscal deficit. You know, we spend $7 trillion a year. We're bringing about $5 trillion of revenue. So each year we're piling up $2 trillion of debt. We can't ignore that forever. And I will say that China also has a debt problem, primarily at the provincial and municipal level. They have about $18 trillion debt at the provincial level, which is almost the size of their GDP, depending on what exchange rate you use. So which country better manages their debt and budget is probably going to win the rivalry. I'll say this, America also needs to stay a reliable and trusted ally to keep a balance of power in the Western Pacific. And when I say trusted ally and partner, you know, that's across the board. Europe, in Asia, I'm an Asia guy. So in particular, South Korea and Japan, Australia, we really need to stand as one with them. And as my colleague mentioned, the recent brouhaha regarding Taiwan and Japan, I think we really need to back up Japan. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that I thought everybody was worried whether Japan would be with us on Taiwan. And now in Tokyo, they're wondering, are we with them? And then I won't talk about Pentagon reform, but that obviously has to be accelerated. And then in terms of deterrence, everybody's talked about deterrence. That's the way we keep peace. I will just say finally that money spent on deterrence is seldom wasted. And that's all I got to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, this is like a very hard act to follow. I think I'm at the end of the day, and I don't know if I have to tell some jokes or what to keep you guys entertained. So I'm Dan Runde. Thanks for having me. I'm really glad you all have invested the time to come to Washington. Thank you for investing the time. We are grateful for your partnership as allies and friends of the United States, and we can't do anything alone. And so I think I think this is the way we build bridges, and we're grateful for you investing the time, so thank you. I wrote a book a couple of years ago. I'm a senior advisor at CSIS. I'm also a senior advisor at a public affairs firm called BGR. And I wrote a book called The American Imperative, Reclaiming Global Leadership Through Soft Power. My thesis is and was that there are sort of three theaters of competition with the Chinese Communist Party. The first is a military one. I hardly knew what ATACMS were until 18 months ago, so I don't really know a lot about the defense side of things. The second is the technology sphere. I can hardly use my iPhone. I can't tell you a lot about AI and that kind of a thing. But I think the third sphere is in the realm of a lot of it is playing out in, I'm going to describe it as the global south and in the multilateral fora, multilateral contexts. So I wanted to use my time to talk about the multilateral system. You're all members. The United States is members of about 130 UN agencies, the World Bank, the FAO, all agencies that your governments, your countries are members of. We're very conflicted about multilateral institutions in the United States. We don't want them to sort of tie us down. At the same time, these are important institutions for burden sharing and collective action and problem solving. In recent years, what's happened is, I'd say certainly in the last 10 years, competition, great power competition is playing out in a much more intensified and sharp way in multilateral fora. And some of these are really obscure things. Here in the United States, if you say, okay, well, I'm really concerned about who's going to become the next head of the Food and Agriculture Organization, almost nobody in Washington knows what exactly the Food and Agriculture Organization does. There's 500 or so members of Congress in the United States. I'm not sure that many, these are all smart, capable, successful people if they've been elected. But if I asked most members of Congress what exactly the World Bank does or the International Monetary Fund does, they're not totally sure what these folks what these folks actually do. Can you get a car loan from these institutions or not? I mean, literally, it's that kind of a thing. And it's not a question of, it's just these can be very obscure institutions. Here's the issue, though. These institutions do several things. They often have money, a lot of money. Sometimes these institutions oftentimes set global standards of various kinds. And the third thing that they do is that they often have sensitive and actionable information in different ways. So what you've seen in the last 10 plus years is the Chinese Communist Party getting a lot better at sending diplomats to all sorts of obscure technical organizations, sending very large teams, where in the past the United States sort of didn't take these things that seriously. And as I said, we have a little bit of a historic love-hate relationship with these things. I mean, I don't want to out my mother, but I think my mother would say we ought to get out of most of them. They're useless for the most part, or these people are tax-free and they don't pay their parking tickets and all this kind of a thing. So but the problem is, to the extent that the United States and our allies leave these institutions, they're being taken over and used as force multipliers by our adversaries in ways that wasn't the case 10 or 15 years ago. You see this in places like ICAO or the World Health Organization, where Taiwan is kicked out of observer status of these institutions as soon as you have someone from the Chinese Communist Party who takes over these things. Or at the FAO, where a member of the Chinese Communist Party runs the FAO and parrots Russian language talking points about the full-scale illegal invasion of Ukraine for long periods of time. So I think we're in the process of deciding. I mean, there are 130 of them. We're in the process of saying, okay, maybe there are a handful we don't necessarily want to be in. I still think when the smoke clears, I think we'll still be in about 120 of them. So you've heard some things like, oh, the U.S. is going to get out of international institutions. I think it's an exaggeration. I think one of my messages to you is maybe we'll get out of 4 or 5 things like UNRWA, that I think for many Americans think is not something that we want to support, given sort of their terrible behaviors and et cetera. I also think some of the other controversial agencies. I think we've gotten out of we're leaving the World Health Organization in January. I think some of that's personality driven with the current Director General of the World Health Organization, who was perceived here in the United States as being a little too close to the Chinese Communist Party. I think I would like to see him accelerate his exit, and so to the extent anybody has good relations with him, we ought to come up with some kind of a deal to accelerate his exit. and then come up with a reform plan for the United States to return. And so allies like members of this, of your governments should be thinking about what is the reform agenda to get the United States to return to the WHO, because I think we should be returning to it, but we can't return to it, I think, under the current circumstances. But I think overall, there's an understanding and appreciation that we can't, we have to mind the store. And we say in American cowboy language, you have to ride herd. We have to kind of ride herd on these multilateral organizations in a way that maybe in the past we didn't have to. For example, there was, even just in the Trump administration just recently, there's an obscure organization called the International Maritime Organization. There was a series of rules proposals that were going to be harmful to U.S. fleets, ports, and the national interest. And so the U.S. woke up in time to put together a coalition. Many of your governments were involved with this to stop something that was not perceived as in the American interest. So what does this all mean for you? Well, I think several things. One is we can't just kind of rubbish these, this is more of an American problem. I'm sure most of your governments actually pay, sometimes for smaller countries in particular, multilateral organizations have a lot higher level of value, and oftentimes, but for a big, for the United States, we're conflicted about it. But I would just say we're trying to do a better job of focusing on leadership races and ensuring that we have enough talent. I think it's important that the United States, but also countries, like-minded countries like yours, are sending talented young people to grow up in these systems, because I will tell you the Chinese Communist Party is sending really good young people who speak French and English and have studied in the West. Many have studied in your country, and then they go and they're all members of the Chinese Communist Party, and they grow up in the system, and you can bet your bottom dollar that that's an issue. They're also, China has more embassies than the United States does today. So they can run big, sophisticated, multilateral campaigns in ways that they couldn't have 20 years ago. So there's things like that. There's other things along the lines of we need to have a strategy and how we work with partners and partner countries like yours, not just on leadership races, but building coalitions on different issues and supporting certain kinds of policies and key norms. Because if we don't mind the store, the Chinese Communist Party has the ability today to run the table on any multilateral organization, try and potentially win on any standards issue, potentially win on things like saying, let's disadvantage Taiwan, let's exclude Taiwan, let's do things that are harmful to Israel, etc. So we have to mind the store. We can't blow off, as we say in a colloquially American English, these multilateral organizations, even if there's a temptation to do so. So I think it's important when you talk to your American interlocutors about these institutions. A lot of Republicans are like, this stuff is useless. But I think it's important, as you say, like, this is important to us because this puts Israel at risk. This is important to us because this puts Taiwan at risk. This is important to us because they're going to direct a lot of money to stuff you don't want. This is important to us because they're going to set standards that are going to hurt the American national security or American economic security. So make it in those sorts of terms. Don't make arguments of sustainable development goals or the global order or, and also, as you talk to American interlocutors, especially the Trump administration, you want to talk about how your partner governments are burden sharing in these institutions. We are paying our dues, we're doing this, we're sending excellent people, and we're making sure that we're crowding out the Chinese Communist Party or other adversaries. So why don't I just stop there, given that we're the lateness of the hour. Thanks.
Fantastic. There's the other microphone. Okay. Yeah. There we go. We're going to foster discussion. Is there questions?
I'd be open to it, but yeah.
Okay, so we're nearing the end. You all deserve an award, first of all. Lesser minds and bodies wouldn't be able to withstand that or absorb 16 hours of amazing content. So it's a lot. This was a great panel, too. Sorry we were interrupted, but that was pretty fascinating. Tour de force from Chairman McCall. This is an important topic. I wish we could have done it earlier, but it's a great way to end the day as well. And so maybe we'll turn to folks for questions, but I just wonder internally if you discussed some things you wanted to cover before we do that, or not.
Just one thing, Chairman McCall mentioned drones. Carbon fiber is used for the manufacture of some of the best drones, but also for wind turbines. There is one American manufacturer of carbon fiber left. It's a subsidiary of a Japanese company. You have at least 2 Chinese state-subsidized companies that are undercutting the market price of carbon fiber by, I think it's about 33% less that they're selling that. You can't survive such competition just on market terms. They're very strategic. It's the same thing that happened with rare earth magnets in the late 1990s, which right now is a leverage point. There was a AP article the other day where someone mentioned that we're playing checkers and China's playing chess. Actually, that's the wrong game. They're playing Wei Qi. Some of you may know what is Go. It's a very strategic game where you surround your opponent and it takes a lot of patience. That's the game that they're playing. It's long term. We need to wake up to that.
Thank you, Piero. So I've got the mic here. Una, let me bring it around to you. That's Una MacDonald, who now lives in Washington, D.C., but originally from the UK, was a member of Parliament.
Thank you very much. I just want to refer to instruments of oppression in China and to outline the importance of central bank digital currency. You don't need to invade Tiananmen Square in the way that happened awfully in the past. What you need to do is to control individuals' expenditure. And that is what Chinese CBDC is used for. Some Western countries, including the UK, have flirted with the idea of a CBDC, a central bank digital currency. That is to concentrate too much power in the hands of the government through its central bank, because you can easily trace every single item of expenditure, if you wish to, for every single individual. And you can use this, you could, in the West. The chairman of the select committee in the UK, talking to the central bank governor at the time, Andrew Bailey, and Andrew Bailey talked about the examination of this topic that was going on and said, of course, we would never do that with it. The chairman said to Andrew Bailey, but you won't always be there. And that is the key issue for Western democracies. Whoever's running the show at the moment won't always be there in terms of mortality, if nothing else. And so an idea, I think, should not be flirted with, but at the same time, we need to understand the way in which it is used by the Chinese government.
Thank you. Any comments on that?
Right.
You're right. Okay. Well, and I will add. I mean, I know this is a China forum, but we've seen some of that in the United States, right? And in Western, I mean, we had the debanking here. We still have that. We're trying to address that. The administration with new rules. We saw in Canada not that many years ago during COVID, where there was objection to the severe restrictions of who could go out and do this and that.
The Internet of Things is great until you realize North Korea's got the off switch, and this is sort of an example of that. You give these authoritarians the chance to take control of the money system or anything else. In all societies, things are bad. We need to expand freedom and liberty, or you have these sorts of temptations by closet authoritarians. They come out of the closet and start debanking people and doing other things because for whatever reason, it's not good.
Or totalitarians.
Yeah, they get in touch with their inner totalitarian.
Any other questions?
There's one over here.
Yes, sir. Well, let me move over here, and then.
Thank you. So I worked for both Trump's first administration and some of this administration as well. And one thing that you talked about China's strategy, how they can work kind of in long-term strategic goals. I saw myself on a trip in Panama. Just the Panamanians were describing me this partnership that they had with China for such a long time. So what, given, we've had all these discussions on democracy and things that we want to keep as our principles, but given that situation of where we have shorter election timeframes, and what can we do long-term strategically to our adversaries like China in regard to this kind of long-term strategic planning?
Sorry, the question about Panama? The question's about Panama?
No, the question's in general about like China's, I think it is an advantage in some point that they have this longer term strategic planning where they can plan out for years, 10 years, 12, 20 years, where we're a little bit dependent on our election cycles and things like that, our administration changes. So how do we overall keep our democracy but still have some of these long-term strategic planning?
So the first thing, I would say I wouldn't give too much confidence to the Chinese Communist Party to be a long-term planner. They've made lots of mistakes. They open themselves up to a lot of vulnerabilities. We're just not good at taking advantage of it. So I would say what we need to do is to understand the Chinese Communist Party better than we did ever the Soviet Union. So we have quite a task ahead of us. We're still, there's a core of that understanding here in this town over the last 10, 15 years, but it's far from where it needs to be. The other is we have to reorganize for the task. We are a government that's really kind of in this weird hybrid between still a Cold War and fighting Al-Qaeda type, global jihadist type. We're not organized for task. We're in a new Cold War. We have to act like it, and we have to operationalize our government, the agencies as such. We're still not there. So those are two things. We did it in 1948 with the National Security Act, created new structures, new organizations to wage the Cold War. We need to do the same thing now. But again, the Chinese are making lots of mistakes. We just need to take better advantage of it. But that's just my contribution.
And you can plan, but as they say in the Marine Corps, plan early, plan twice, right? So you make a plan, and maybe it's not such a good plan, particularly in a command and control economy. And here you have a lot more input from folks. And Piero?
Yeah, and I'll stand up just so I can see you there. I think one example of short-term thinking that's been so destructive is the idea of quarterly profits. And corporations are just thinking about the next quarter. We have to stop thinking like that. And if you look at, there's a very good book, Apple in China, that William McGee wrote. I would highly recommend it. So many of what we consider American corporations have outsourced our entire industry. And if you look at, there's a very cautionary tale, Nortel, the Canadian company, when they entered the China market with great fanfare, it doesn't exist anymore. It was cannibalized by Huawei. Okay, that is the fate that many corporations with their short-term thinking of immediate profits are going to suffer and have suffered. Thank you.
Yep, I'll be right there. One more, and then we're gonna have an open forum if there's any folks still standing who want to make some remarks.
Thank you. My name is Chelsea Chen. I'm from New York. I'm originally born and raised in Beijing, and all my family members, they're in Beijing. I'm the only one who live in the United States. I'm very proud to be a U.S. citizen. So I just want, in the meanwhile, I'm also Falun Gong practitioners for the past 15 plus years, and this is really the best thing happened to me. And I know for this forum, there's a lot of talk about China topic and also about human rights abuses, especially on Falun Gong issues. And I just want to share some important information to let everyone who care about China to know. First of all, since 1999 persecution started, and Falun Gong practitioners outside China, they're not just, they're very busy in terms of counter the persecution coming from Chinese Communist Party. And Epoch Times is a Falun Gong practitioners started global media. And 21 years ago, Epoch Times published a series of articles. It's called 9 Commentary on Chinese Communist Party. And this book is for the first time, separate Chinese Communist Party to Chinese people and China. So I think many of the politicians in America today realize that Chinese Communist Party, they don't they don't represent the Chinese people. And China has a 5,000 years of history, and it's a very spiritual culture. And but Chinese Communist Party is based on Marxist, which is a European thing. It's never a Chinese thing. So basically, we view Chinese Communist Party as a kidnapper. They kidnap China as a nation and cut the root,
Amen. Exactly.
cut the root, from about Chinese people from the traditional Chinese culture, which is very spiritual culture. And I just want to let people know, you might have heard of Shenyun Performing Arts, and this is a Falun Gong practitioner started performing arts company based in the United States, and they do global tour since 2006, and they go to many of the European countries. So catch the show if you can. And this show actually presented, what is authentic Chinese culture is about. It's very spiritual culture, and many of you have saw that. And
that's fantastic. Thank you so much. That's great. Thank you.
yeah, and I just want to let you know the Chinese government have been go after Shenyun since day one, and this sabotage has been intensified since last summer. They have been Chinese Communist Party has been using a weaponized U.S. legal system and U.S. media such as New York Times to basically tear down Shenyun Performing Arts. So there's 8 lawsuits going on right now against the Shenyun company and the individuals, and as well as they're trying to bankrupt them.
We're all with you, but maybe folks could talk to you bilaterally after the conference.
Right.
We should probably wrap it up.
Right, okay. So sorry about that. And also my colleagues, I want to just give 1 minute to my colleagues, to...
So I don't know, JC, I think we're kind of running out of time, my friend.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. JC, I think...
Only a minute, right? You're going to do for 1 minute, right? Not 5 minutes, right?
Less than
okay,
1 minute.
Good.
Okay, yes. China is a big issue, and we do believe communism is the root cause of all issues nowadays in the world. And as it's heavily infiltrated the Western world, especially in the United States. So as my friend says, we are U.S. citizens. We're so proud, and see how we should stop that infiltration. And thank you.
So I don't know if you want to address any of those observations or questions. And
But I think the last question there goes to education about communism, and I think it's one thing that's very disturbing is you see a lot of people, young people, identifying as communists. We saw someone elected in New York as mayor. That really is surprising. There's a saying in Italian that someone who che hai un comunista 20 anni no hai cuore. Someone who's not a communist at age 20 has no heart. Someone who's still a communist at age 20 has no head. But it is very important, I think, that we educate young people as to the nature of communism. I know Florida, working with the Victims of Communism Association, has a curriculum designed to educate people on what communism is. We don't need to relearn those lessons of that bloody system, totalitarian system, and the legacy of death that it brought. So hopefully we can, educate the next generation. Thank you.
so I was going to open forum. I think there's an interest in most everybody in the room to wrap this up. It's been a long 2 days. And so why don't we do that? We'll hammer the gavel down, and then you have something you got to say. We got 3 forums coming up in 2026. There'll be a 4th announced soon. And but this has been great. So I thank our speakers. I thank all of you attending and the 4,000 something attending virtually. Hope you can come in person in the future. And but thank you all. Appreciate it.